Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Fundamentalists podcast. This is the day after Valentine's Day. Happy belated Valentine's Day. This will probably go up, tomorrow, Sunday?
Maybe. I mean, it might be hard for Corey to get it up that quick.
That's true.
Although he's very good, so
good.
Who knows?
Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Whatever happens, thank you. Welcome back, folks. My name is Elliott Morgan. I am here with my good friend, Peter Rollins, who is a philosopher, writer, theologian, speaker, handsome man.
Yeah, all of the above.
And I am all those things as well.
Yeah.
And so today we're going to be talking about purity culture, which I'm very excited to talk about because you got all sorts of goodies in this one. This is going to be a good episode. How you doing?
I'm doing good. What have I been up to? You know, typical, very chilled. I was in Belfast for a couple of weeks, and that's about it.
So we can blame the lack of podcasts on Belfast.
On Belfast, yeah, we have been pretty poor.
How's Belfast?
Good. I had a great time. I went home for no particular reason, just to see people and hang out, and it was lovely.
Really? That's great.
Yeah, it was good.
You had a good party time, and did you reconnect with?
Did play poker with my old poker friends.
Nice.
All of that.
Did you win?
No, sad. I could say yes, but I didn't. I should have lied.
You could lie.
I could lie. I could edit. Could
you
edit this?
Sure.
So let's start from here. Yeah, no, I totally kicked
Yeah,
ass.
you killed him. Yeah,
killed
good
him.
for you, man. Good for you.
Nice.
Did you come in? Did you place like second or?
No, so we didn't do a tournament. We just played cash, and I think I was like 20 quid down, something like that. So
that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah,
I miss playing poker. Remember when we did that?
Oh yeah, we gotta do that again.
Yeah, I need to I forget the rules immediately, let alone the strategy and how to actually be okay at it. But it is fun whenever we.
Well, I've been playing for years, and then when I've gone to Vegas to sit down, suddenly I forget everything because I'm so nervous. When you sit down with a pile of people you don't know.
You don't seem nervous. I've been with you in Vegas, which, by the way, I'm still down to do a second Vegas.
A Vegas Fundamentalist podcast?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm totally
yet another.
for that. Absolutely.
We do a follow-up after the last trip, which was crazy. But I've not heard from Curtis whether he's down for Vegas.
For another trip,
yeah. I think I ruined it for him by not being there, basically.
Okay,
but anyway.
Did you ever talk about that in the podcast, that you basically abandoned your friends?
On the podcast, no. But yeah, I abandoned my friends. A girl showed up. So I said when Curtis and I had such a great plane ride there.
Yeah.
Like I remember we took off in Burbank and we were just like immediately talking and having just great conversations, and then we landed and I get text messages from this girl named Grace who was like, okay, I'm on my way to Vegas. And I was like, I remember turning to Curtis and being like, if she comes to Vegas, I'm not going to be around. Have fun. And in my mind I'm like, this is me just cashing out all the bro cards that I could possibly cash out. But I still felt bad. And then Grace didn't know at the time that I had gone with you guys. She thought I was just going by myself, which was the plan, because originally me and her were going to go, and then she, thought she couldn't go, quote unquote. And so then it was like, oh, okay. So, well, I feel bad, but I apologize. Yeah. I don't know. I did everything I could to make amends there, and we have moved past it.
That's good. He's looking really well at the moment. I saw him the other day.
He is, right?
Yeah, my goodness. Like, he's got that beard going. And,
and he looks like a substantial human.
Yeah.
Which I think I'm starting to fill out a little bit and get I'm also looking at
you're the type of person who, you get better with age. You just look too young when you're in your 20s.
That's what this podcast should be about, is how lucky it is to be a dude and to age into... Yeah. You have the same thing. You don't get less cool as you age.
Well, thank you. Well, that could be a hidden dig.
You can't get less cool when you're not there already.
Exactly. Yeah.
You've already hit rock bottom. So let's dive in. We're doing purity culture. You have all sorts of stuff to talk about. This is an interesting subject matter because it will require some excuse me, some dancing a little bit, but I'm excited to do it. I think people will like it.
Oh yeah, I just guessed actually or just realized that the standard definition of purity culture, not everybody will know what that is. Do you want to explain what purity culture means?
Oh,
in
I
the
will.
Religious world,
yes,
and then I can jump from there.
In the religious world,
well, or I think that's where it comes from. And
okay.
Well, that's where the term purity culture is where it's mostly used.
Well, I will absolutely take the reins here, Pete. I'm an expert on purity culture, myself being a very pure person.
Absolutely.
Purity culture, I think, in the modern interpretation, would be basically the conservative American Christian worldview that says that sin is rampant. There are sinners out there. They are different. They are bad. They are they've been seduced by the devil, and therefore Jesus, who washes your soul with his blood or whatever, makes you pure and makes you able to enter into the kingdom of the Lord.
Well, now that's interesting, because that seems to me to be like a very kind of broad purity culture. I thought it was primarily to do with not having sex before marriage.
You're talking about purity rings.
Oh, are this purity rings and purity culture not?
They probably are.
Are connected?
I bet they're connected.
Okay.
Yeah. They have to be.
Yeah.
I'm so far ruined. We were just talking before.
Oh yeah.
Before we started this recording. I'm getting over a cold. Sorry, folks. Sorry, Corey. Yeah, I'm listening to this Rhett and Link series right now, and I'm wearing their shirt coincidentally. But
are we getting money for that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For us to be sponsored, yeah. For us to, yeah. You don't want. We're not going to put our social footprint out there without getting a little cha-ching.
Oh yeah.
We should start doing the podcast more. But anyway, yeah. So I've been listening to their stuff and sort of talking about the world that they came from, and they haven't talked too much about the purity ring and the purity culture stuff. But I definitely grew up around that, where people would wear purity rings or promise rings. I got my ex-wife a promise ring when we were like in high school or something like that.
After you got married, to make sure that there was no sex after marriage.
Exactly.
Yeah,
make
good.
sure. Yeah. And ultimately, yeah.
Because I think of it, although I didn't grow up in American religious culture, but that largely it was around this notion of the pure, the chosen you're talking about, but also it's around about when to have sex and how to have sex.
Yes.
Is no sex before marriage.
I didn't hear about the how.
All right.
Yeah, they kept me in the dark about that. It was just the when.
You're still figuring it out.
Oh yeah, I have no idea. Yeah,
I've seen the videos.
Yeah. Well, I like to text people. I like to show progress. Yeah. So, but you're talking about something totally different.
Yeah, I mean, it's connected in a way, because purity culture at its very basic is all about managing cleanliness and dirt. Who is inside, who is outside, who is pure, who is impure. And dirt is simply matter. In its most basic sense, dirt is matter out of place. So you look at a sand pit and you don't think of it as dirty. But if the sand is in your house, you think of it as dirty because it's matter that's out of place. It's not in its right place. Or you don't think of saliva in your mouth as dirty, but if you spit it into a glass, you'd find it hard to drink because it seems dirty, right? It's in the wrong place.
Yes.
So dirtiness is kind of matter out of place, and purity cultures are all about how to manage rituals of cleanliness. What is clean and what is dirty, what is toxic and what is not toxic. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it is I've heard, and numerous people, I won't mention names, but a lot of people have been talking about purity culture in religious terms and kind of digging at it and saying how funny it is. Because in purity culture and religion, it's like sex is fine, sex is not dirty, but it's dirty when it's out of place, when it's done in a certain way or outside of marriage. So it's all about the location.
That was a lesson, I remember being a kid, my mom, because I would always ask a bunch of questions, curious little twerp brain, and I would be like, I remember being very convinced that sex was bad. Like, sex is a bad thing, and from a very young age. And then my mom would clarify and go, no, sex is not bad. Sex outside of marriage is bad, and that's sinful. And then I was like, okay, so it was a weird sort of nuanced approach to it, but also one that still basically sent the same message. It's like, oh, this basically all that means is that marriage saves the act of sex, like in a almost religious sense, where it's like, oh, this thing that would be dirty, you then go through a ceremony, and now that thing is approved by the Lord. Yeah,
and you'll see there are lots of like confessional Christian pastors who they will they will sing the praises of sex. Like sex becomes, within a certain confines, it's like pure, it's sacred, it's beautiful. They'll talk about their sex life with their partner. They'll kind of preach about it. So it's kind of like an extreme, is like there is this purity, the sacredness, the beauty of it on one side. But if it's out of place, then it's dirty, it's wrong.
Yeah,
right?
there's also like a faux. I mean, I remember in college, the church that I went to, which the pastor was great. It's a great church. Blanking on the name of it right now, but he would talk very highly about sex, and in a way that was like kind of funny and kind of like almost taboo or edgy, because he was a pastor that was singing the praises of sex. And I think it made people feel less jammed up about the subject, but also it was still always under the umbrella of marriage, and so it was almost like, rather than, it was like the shift from purity culture in high school with purity rings and don't have sex before marriage. It's like the doctrine didn't change, but the focus changed in the messaging, where they just focused so on how great sex is and how much fun and how wild and crazy sex is with your marital partner for life.
And that's key for a purity culture, because in a purity culture, the pure is pure. Like there's no dirt in it. It's not. There's no ambivalence. Like so, the pure is pure and the dirty is dirty. So
nothing makes sex more fun than it being totally pure and totally
I know.
holy.
That is a real problem. Like that's why people like Bataille hated sexual revolution, made sex too pure. But that's another topic.
That's it.
Yeah. But so you have this, right? Religious world, purity culture. There's a few people kind of like who have come out of that, and maybe rightfully so. They're exercising their demons about it, etc. But the implication is that we live with less purity cultures than we did, or less people are convinced by those types of purity cultures.
We're so past that.
Yeah. And my worry is, and I
give us the bad news.
Well, yeah, here's the bad news. I worry that there's a proliferation of new purity cultures. What?
Tell me more.
Yeah. Maybe purity cultures always exist at all times, but we are living in a time where there are just new insiders and outsiders, new purity and impurity rules, new rituals of cleanliness. By the way, not just culturally, like Twitter or something like that, but also biologically. Like I maybe we'll get into this, maybe we won't, but like MCS, multiple chemical sensitivity, is a kind of experience in which a person starts to feel that they're allergic to chemicals in modern life. It's also called like building illness and environmental illness, but it's where increasingly, like there's a place called Snowflake, Arizona, where people live who feel that they can't be around any modern chemicals or phone signals, or even paper. It has a chemical dimension, and so again, there's a whole controversy about to what extent is MCS real, but
of course it's real across the board. It just, is it medical or is it
that's a nice way to put it.
This is it's not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
So,
but it's definitely an element of people trying to work out cleanliness and dirtiness. Also, obsessive compulsive disorders, where people are obsessively kind of working out cleanliness and uncleanliness. And if someone
in the most pristine apartment that the world has ever seen,
nothing is out of place in this apartment. It's a serial killer apartment.
You were talking about the Roomba. iRoomba or whatever it is, and you're like, yeah, it's great, it just keeps the place clean, picks up all the dust, and I was like, wow. I wonder what it would be like to live somewhere where the level of dirtiness that you worry about is just dust on the floor. Like, I was like, oh, that's so far down the totem, or down the pole for my priority cleaning wise, where it's like, oh yeah, no, me and my girlfriend live, like, we're pile people, there's piles everywhere. It's like a Roomba isn't going to solve the big problem.
Yeah.
That's the literal surface.
I have the Roomba going 5 times a day.
Good. Yeah. It's just your friend.
yeah, my only friend.
No wonder you're not hanging out with people at night. You're just hanging out with your Roomba.
My Roomba. Yeah.
So Snowflake,
Snowflake, Arizona. So even biologically, we're seeing phenomenon in which people are, I say, obsessive compulsive, who's maybe keeping their garage completely ordered, no thing that's out of place. Um, and I mentioned Twitter, where there's like, again, rules for who is pure and who is right and who is impure and who is bad. And there's a lack of ambivalence, and there's a lack of kind of like dirt and cleanliness don't interweave.
Is ambivalence the right word?
Yeah, well, so this is a word that Melanie Klein used, this theorist Melanie Klein. I wanted to kind of bring her into the conversation.
And who's she?
So she was a psychoanalyst writing at the beginning of the 20th century, big influence or influenced by Freud, and she worked with children. So her thing was children and infants, and she developed a theory that there are two very primal I was going to say stages, but they're not stages. Mm-hmm. They're kind of processes.
Okay.
The first is called the paranoid schizoid process or position, and the other one's called the depressive position. And she kind of postulated that infants basically between 0 and 6 months.
That's so insane.
So insane. I mean, that was one of her innovations, was she went really young when she was really analyzing infants.
I mean, in terms, as someone who is very, very interested in all this stuff and psychology and all that, the overwhelming amount of evidence and just sort of this consensus on the fact that it's so early in the life, before you can talk, before you're aware of yourself, is when all of these issues can arise, blows my mind every day. Yeah. Like anytime I hear it, like my therapist will be like, he'll be like, look, this stuff, he's like, this happens between the ages of like 0 and 3. He's like, there's nothing you can do about it. And I'm like, this is your crazy
compulsive masturbation issue?
No, the murdering of the cats. Yeah.
Oh, right. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the masturbation is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like, ointments that heal everything, but that's gross. Yeah. So 0 to 6 months. And you're saying, okay, so you're saying the difference between like a stage and a process is basically like a stage almost implies that everyone sort of goes through this.
Yeah.
But a process is something that is some people go through and some people don't, or some babies go through and some babies don't.
And I should have said, but the better word is position. That's what, but yeah, position or a position is more that you don't necessarily move through it. Like you don't, because a stage is almost like something you leave behind.
Gotcha.
Whereas a position is, for her, this paranoid schizoid position, it manifests itself in adult life as well. You don't move beyond it. You can minimize it and pretty much get rid of it, but there's if your back's against the wall, it might flare up again.
Yeah. Okay.
And the definition of the paranoid schizoid position is, it's basically the paranoid dimension is the feeling that there is some external force that is threatening your annihilation. There is something out there that will overcome you, overpower you. You're helpless to stop it. And the schizoid side of the term means you split the world into good and bad. There's good objects, and there's good things in the world, and there's bad things in the world, and you very much kind of like differentiate between the two.
Okay.
And that is similar. The reason why I wanted to bring Klein into it is because I think she gives a very simple way of understanding a purity culture, because purity culture is about splitting into cleanliness and dirtiness. It's a paranoid schizoid kind of position. And in religion, a lot of religion obviously is about cleanliness rituals, about what is clean and what is dirty. And if you look at religions like Judaism and Christianity, what you discover is there are purity rules, and then someone comes up from within the religion and questions the purity rules and says, hold on a second, the people you say are dirty, are they really dirty? And you say you're clean, are you really that clean? And they kind of like ask questions of and kind of deconstruct the cleanliness, dirtiness system.
And his name was Jesus.
And his name was Jesus, absolutely.
Right? Like he questioned.
Well, yeah, you could say exactly. Well, you can see one of the things that Jesus did as a Jew coming from the Jewish religion was questioning the purity culture of the day.
And going, whoever has not sinned, throw the first stone. I mean, I feel like that's one of the best nuggets.
Absolutely. And then that story tells about like was it a Pharisee and a tax collector, and at that time the Pharisees were very strongly within a purity culture, and the tax collectors were very much seen as outside. And so he tells a story that, or the Good Samaritan. All of these are stories that question purity culture.
Yeah.
Who's inside, who's outside, and this is what Melanie Klein calls the depressive position. The depressive position is when she says you start to tolerate, she calls it ambivalence and ambiguity. You start to realize that the thing that you think is dirty, it's not completely dirty. And when you think of yourself as clean, you're not completely clean. Mm-hmm. And there's a porousness, and there's a dimension in which there's an interconnection between the two that you're denying. And so the depressive position is when you start to break out of the purity culture mentality and have a more rounded notion of reality.
It is the most on-brand Peter Rollins thing to be like, the position you want to take is called depressive.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, what are the odds?
What are the odds of that?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, after 6 months, many infants might actually experience or understand that there's a spectrum of good and bad and everything.
Yeah, she thinks that it's happening as well even before 6 months. I think she sees it like between 0 and 4 months roughly. Now, by the way, this is just her initial reflections, but early on, the child really can't have a kind of an ambivalent notion of reality, can't have an integrated notion. She calls it partial objects, and Freud does well, but a partial object is you kind of break the mother down to they call it the good breast, right, which is when the child is getting food, and the bad breast, which is when the mother's not around, the child's hungry. And basically the world is just this crazy place of good and bad. But then, very early on, the child begins to get a richer experience, and they goes from partial objects to whole objects. They realize their mother, for example, is not all bad or all good. And that's a very healthy thing, you know.
It's like it's going from hate the sinner, or hate the sin, not the sinner, to all of us have fallen short of the glory of God, basically.
Wow, that's very good. You should be a preacher, man.
Dude,
that's good. There you go.
I don't know what just happened.
Yeah.
That was I just fired off the last 2 brain cells that I have this weekend.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean, definitely you could read Jesus as, you know, kind of an explosion of the depressive position within a religious purity culture.
Cool.
And it is funny she uses the word depressive, because here's the bad news and then the good news. The bad news is, for her, there's no way beyond the depressive position.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it's kind of, it can mature and it can get better, but the depressive position is kind of where we all have to kind of find a place.
Where would you go? I mean, what would be the
beyond of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be hard to maybe define. Well, for her, there is no beyond.
Yeah.
The beyond is simply...
Why would you want to beyond, though? I mean, would you want to be... I feel like when you get to a place where you can understand ambiguity, then you're pretty much in the best position to navigate life. I can't imagine there being, unless, because then it seems like you get into the advancement of this would be where we're at now, which is people who have convinced themselves that they understand ambiguity or that they accept ambiguity, but in actuality, they are still mentally casting people out who are different from them or tweeting about them.
Yes, 100%. And I suppose the development is, she would say that early in the depressive position, that is where there's extreme guilt. And that is where, because, like, right, if I initially think that you're an asshole, which is, you know, relatively accurate. Yeah. But I
happens a lot, not a lot happens.
Yeah, I've seen the Twitter comments.
Yeah.
So I really demonize you. I make you into a one-dimensional enemy, and then I kind of, like, you know, move into a more depressive position, and I realize that I've projected a lot of stuff onto you. I've been an asshole. It is depressive, because what I have to do is I feel guilt. I suddenly feel guilty. I feel like I was bad. I might have to apologize, or I repress, or I try to find reparations.
Yeah.
So Klein talks about repression and reparations. So the early stage of the depressive position is hitting reality principle, and it's experiencing life that your lover is not perfect, right? It's experiencing the reality that everybody has issues. So that's a bit depressing, and there's guilt, and there's an attempt to, do find reparations for the other.
Fix it.
Fix it, exactly. But then once you've kind of like integrated this idea, then the depressive phase is no longer depressing. So you'll always have it's healthy to have a little bit of guilt, a little bit of like, oh, I was a bit bad. But I suppose for her, success is not, yeah, as you say, overcoming the depressive phase, but integrating it so well into your life that you don't experience, the manic paranoid schizoid position, and then you don't experience the extreme guilt that comes out of that.
And almost like that's how you get to real love. Like loving other people is when you can understand that when you can love someone with all their junk, then that's way better than trying to love someone and assume constantly that they're perfect, or that you're the most flawed one, or that you're that makes sense. We go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, we since I was thinking about the stages, and or positions, I guess, but with the Valley folk and the way that we've sort of navigated the past few months, it's been a difficult time and a very depressing time. Not necessarily depressive, but it was interesting because I've had experiences where my quote unquote audience will turn on me and say horrible things and just vicious things. Joe and Steve, I don't think, had experienced that level of hate before. And none of us had experienced it from our own Valley folk, our core audience. And the amount of people who would reach out and say like horrendous things to us because they, what my girlfriend says is, the good news is that the internet always knows everything all the time. And so people would lash out at us, and still do, thinking that, we're these like evil backstabbing dudes. And then the wave comes after it. And the way that Joe described it was, he was like, it starts with emotion. It starts with this like being very upset, seeing things very black and white, like this person is perfect and you guys are all evil, and that kind of thing. Yeah. And then there were a few people, a small fraction of people, who flipped it, who went full bore the other direction. Yep. And all
the right ones,
the correct ones, yes.
Yeah.
The ones who got it. That's off the record. But yeah, and then there are people who go, oh yeah, no, we wish the best for all of you guys. And then freaking dude, so many handwritten notes, pages long, apologizing, direct emails. I'm still getting ones trickling in of like just on Instagram DMs, people being like, I was so upset by what happened. And I knew when it happened that it was symbolic for the people that were upset about it. So there wasn't too much like hatred of them. Yeah. After a while though, there's been an anger that's developed where it's like, if you're not going to exit this position, if you are truly believing that it is black and white and that you have it figured out as someone who doesn't know anything, then my patience runs like real low. But the wave of emotion to logic, or paranoid schizophrenic to depressive, to see in real time, while I've been doing my best and the dudes have been doing their best to just be ourselves, it's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, like, because it's completely removed from me in the sense of going, I have nothing to do with this. Like the level of vitriol that's coming toward me truly has not a lot to do with me. Yeah. I'm a part of it. I'm symbolic, but it's something. It's so clear that it's something that affected people in a grander way that I have no control over, and actually don't mind. Like I differ from Steve and Joe here a little bit, because I think
Because you're
it's great.
heartless.
Huh?
Because you're heartless.
Because I'm heartless, yeah.
You feel nothing.
Or yes, I feel nothing, and I'm a sociopath. But yeah, the idea that this group of 4 people meant something so deep for people means, of course, people are going to project onto it. They're going to see their own relationships. We've influenced people's senses of humor. We've influenced their idea of friendship, and we also played nice and made nice for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I think it's perfectly natural for people to just sort of lash out. But man, the fact that it's still going on is just like, it's getting more and more like, I'm starting to feel like I'm just on a leash, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. You're getting dumb. So.
But it's a great object lesson, what you've just described,
Object
exactly
lesson.
what we're talking about.
Speaking of purity culture,
Yeah. So, because here's the thing, right? This is very useful, because the reason why so many people reacted to your situation is partly because what you guys do, like most people, like a lot of YouTube personalities, you provide a certain stability in anxious times for people who might feel like in the modern world, it's a very difficult place. People can feel lonely, people can feel anxious, people can have family issues and family problems. And on YouTube, what you do is you provide a context where, and it's real, it's an authentic thing where they connect with you. You have you present also a stable kind of like family relationship. And they feel part of that, and they are part of that in a variety of ways, especially with these interactive things like Twitch or whatever. And so when a certain break happens, that is going to cause a lot of anxiety and a lot of emotion. And so the paranoid schizoid position is going to manifest, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just what's going to happen when you realize it, you accept it. Of course, everyone's going to feel it. I've been there, we all have been there. But over time, people, hopefully more and more people will move from the paranoid schizoid position to the depressive position. And that's
what you can hope in for a comedy group.
Yeah. I've seen your
the
comedy.
goal.
Yep. We just want to make you depressed, get you to the depressive position. Yep.
That is my comedy. Yeah.
That is exactly it. But I seen it on actually the comments and things on your YouTube channel, where I was amazed that very quickly I saw numerous people saying, I'm sorry, I was just frustrated and anxious, and I realized I don't have the full story, and I'm sure it's a complicated thing. And that's the early stage of the depressive, because there's guilt and there's reparation. The other thing people do, and you don't hear from these people, is repression. I've seen this on Twitter, is like someone will attack a group because they see something, say, online, and they really attack it. And then when evidence comes out that that was not the whole story, they just go quiet. You just ignore it and they move on. So there's no reparation, there's just repression. That's still, an advance, but it's not, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And I've seen that loads. I could give loads of examples, but on social media, where people pile onto some individual because they seem like they're all bad, and then evidence comes out that actually the person who was being treated badly is actually maybe the victim. Even things like the Johnny Depp thing and stuff like that. I don't know much about it, but there's examples where people have been piled on.
Did you listen to those recordings?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So it's fascinating. So that's a good example of this. There's loads of examples. But a lot of people just go quiet. And but what I'm always impressed with are the ones who seek reparation. They feel the guilt. They seek the reparation. They send you a letter and they go, and they're not even saying we think you're right. They're just going, I guess it's more complicated.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
That's all it is.
Because that's the truth. The truth is it's complicated.
Yeah.
Life is complicated.
What I've noticed too is the reparations are a great thing to see, or like, it feels good when you sort of see people, like it's having I had a certain amount of faith in our audience that I think was shaken by the fallout that happened. Even though none of it should have been surprising. The way everything went down was not super surprising. But the damage that's done during the paranoid schizophrenic phase is, in my experience, not the damage is done. Like it's not like the reparations of course it's like immediate not forgiveness might be the right word. It sounds a little uppity to say that, but
that is part of it, yeah, the depressive stage.
yeah, but the effects of the cumulative and overwhelming phase and just the stress of that, I think, has affected me as somebody who processes things pretty quickly, way more than I realized, to the point that it's not, the reparations are a beautiful thing to see and they're very nice, but it doesn't outweigh the damage that's done, which I think is the fear with the culture that we're living in right now, where everyone is so ready to jump down everybody's throats for everything, especially politically. And this year, I think, is just going to get worse and worse as we move on, especially if Bernie ends up getting the nomination. It's going to become just haywire because it's going to be two extremes fighting rather than like a moderate and a conservative or whatever. But anyway.
Rather than my very unpopular hot take, which is the rest of them are just neoliberals. So it's choosing, the Democrats and the Republicans, no difference. Bernie's the only, for me, he's the only the only one who's different, whether you like him or not. He's the only one who's not a neoliberal. Yeah. Anyway, but that's
I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah. I'm going to pause for a second. Is that cool? I'm going to pee.
Okay, go for it.
So yeah, thank you for allowing me to urinate real quick. That was very nice. Now I can focus, because the whole time, as soon as we started the podcast, I was like, this will be fine. It'll go away. And then I'm talking and I'm like,
I always have to say before it starts, do you need to go to the bathroom? I forgot to do it today.
We're not stopping on the way. So anyway, it's been a very interesting transition seeing the wave of people change, but then it's basically just hurt feeling. It's just licking your wounds and then having to maintain a sense of self while you're being verbally annihilated, and then rely on the logic of going, I know what this is. Like, I know that it, and I would feel the same way. Like if I saw it from the outside and I was intrinsically attached to a certain version of people, then it would be truly traumatizing for people.
And the difficulty isn't, the difficult situation you had was that in a way you can't do business as usual, because by definition that rupture within the group is going to cause anxiety within a lot of the audience, and it's going to cause a lot of issues, and so just going on business as usual, you're not going to be able to.
It just didn't work.
It just didn't work. It can't work. It has to be addressed, and then you have to try and figure out, how do you live in the aftermath of it. And it's difficult, and you're saying you're kind of you're still navigating that, how to move on.
It's like a married couple that, obviously there's the divorce analogy, which works really well. It's a relationship, but in that particular instance, it's almost like the married couple, the woman is married to a man who is a raging alcoholic, and she's put up with his alcoholism for 25 years, and she just wants him to stop drinking. And then when he actually does stop drinking, then all of a sudden she doesn't have the thing to point to blame for problems anymore. And so then they have to learn how to be an actual couple and see if they even like each other. And so that's it's a similar thing of going, okay, well, now we have to figure out like what this is, because it's something new and it's something different, and it's also coupled with what, at the very time we need something new and different, and to find out what that is, it's the exact same time that we are the most wounded by the situation. And so it's just typical life stuff. It's like, of course it has to happen. When things are going great, it's easy to be like, here's a new thing. And then when it's not, it's like, oh yeah, if only I wasn't feeling this way, then maybe you find that one thing to blame, which kind of, I guess, goes back to what you're talking about with the paranoid schizophrenic. Like, it's in all of us to just go, this thing, if this other thing, if this other person, if this other element, if I was only this, then everything would be great. But I also know that's not necessarily what you're
and the thing
exactly
is,
talking about.
But that is very connected. No, absolutely. And also this is a great kind of event for Valley folk, because it is a learning experience for everybody, including the audience. It's like, because we all have to navigate, how do you break up, and how do you cope with ambiguity, how do you cope with anxiety, how do you because I've just discovered TikTok, right? And I discovered it because my friend Barry, he was looking at it one day, and I was like, well, what is TikTok? He says, it's very addictive. I went onto it, and oh my goodness, it's very addictive. And I haven't figured out why it's addictive yet, but it's addictive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so weird, man.
it's so weird.
I never would have suspected that it would be the thing that takes off.
Yeah, I know, but I was watching. I was last night. I was watching. I was like, my goodness, this is just flicking from one thing to the other. And why was I mentioning TikTok? Because there was a point I was going to make about, what was it about TikTok?
I'm gonna see here. I want you to. I want to know.
You want to? Yeah, we're gonna wait, even if it's 3 hours until this insight comes.
It's a great time for Valley folk because and then like TikTok.
Oh yes, great time for Valley folk. Oh yes, we all have to learn ambiguity. I think maybe I was just going to think that TikTok is so aspirational. It's like Instagram on steroids. It's a very. I was thinking for a young generation that have a lot of anxiety. What these TikToks are showing are these people who are dancing, having fun, having great lives, often very wealthy places. These young people who are very beautiful and have these beautiful homes, and I can understand why people just grasp onto that. It's like a pure kind of like thing, but there's a point when we have to navigate ambiguity, and actually with what's been going on in Valley Folk, that's been happening with your audience. Mm-hmm. They've had to kind of walk through that, and it's kind of cool. And that there's and there's some things you've done with the Valley Cast which have like talked about that very issue and brought it up, and instead of just avoiding it and trying to be like TikTok and trying to kind of like just business as usual, to somehow one is integrate it by talking about it, but then, and here's the next challenge, is how to integrate it into the comedy as well. Is there a different type of comedy that's going to come out of the Valley Folk that's not directly connected to this, but addresses more ambivalence?
That's what I'm hoping for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think where we're at now, I mean, there's a reason I talk about it and am talking about it on this podcast and not the Valley Cast, because it's also like we don't want to address it constantly and make it a thing, but it is integral to who we are as people and as performers / quote unquote artists, whatever you want to say. So that part is just a reality, and we know at this point that we have to get to be very transparent with people, and that's a really beautiful thing. The comedy part I can't wait for. Like I'm so excited about that, because not necessarily
I can't wait till you guys start to do comedy.
Me either. Yeah. Oh my goodness. We're getting there, and we're starting to have fun again, which is great. But it's all fine. Like it even in the worst parts, like as of I don't know, like 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, it was, everyone was very in the dark, but they say that night is darkest just before the dawn, and it's all of a sudden like this past week has been fantastic, and so it all seems to be fine, and I think that's what I was betting on, but who knows? I don't know,
And the other thing, by the way, I don't know if, because you're the YouTube culture guy, but there are more and more YouTubers who are dealing with the complexities of life a bit more. Like Rhett and Link, you say, are literally, they're talking about their past. They're talking about their religious past. They're talking about how they tried to, maybe rejected it, integrate it, wrestling with it, tarrying with it, all of that. Also think about H3H3. They have often done stuff about being honest about depression and difficult things.
Oh, yeah.
And then even a very good British YouTuber, Jackmate, who I like a lot. But, he is pretty real. There's a coffee machine.
Your phone's going off, too. Right. And I had to pee. This podcast. I told you, folks.
Professional.
Perfect.
And these are massive YouTubers who are doing this. And Grace has done it as well. Actually, I've seen that Grace has been talking about kind of the honesty of the difficulties about being a YouTuber, etc. So there's a place for that within the growing, maturing YouTube context.
Yeah, it's growing with the audience, and sometimes you're ahead and sometimes you're behind, which happens a lot. And sometimes it's like people who are, and I think our subreddit, somebody was saying, about a business thing that happened, which business, that word has such a sterile, almost greedy connotation to it. Sometimes we're like, oh, it's just business, but it's like it can be tied to who you are as a person, and so it's like to say business or we did it for this reason and this reason, it can make it seem so much simpler than what it is, because the reality is that if we are doing stuff on YouTube, it's not just a business. It's never just it was never that. It wasn't intended to be a business. It was supposed to be friends hanging out. And then when it stopped being that, we were like, well, if this is dishonest, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to go from there and see what happens. And if it breaks permanently, then it breaks permanently, and that's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. But anyway, we're getting off into my ramblings right now.
Yeah, well, Lou, I think all of that is just a really good, as I said, like, it's an object lesson how this works. Because the other example, of course, is relationships. I have a friend who's kind of navigating a breakup, and I was talking to her a couple of days ago, and she was going through the very common stage of kind of, at first, a kind of paranoid schizoid, to a certain extent, of going like, this person is wrong, I'm right, because I see my perspective. I don't, I think they're acting immaturely. And then moving to the point of they were communicating. Actually, she's very good. She actually communicated, so she wasn't really in a paranoid schizoid position, but she was communicating with him and finding out that he has a position as well. And even if she doesn't fully agree with that position, of going, okay, there's porousness here. It's not a purity culture of there's pure here and toxicity here. It's like, okay, we have to navigate the fact that it's hard to say all the blame is on one side and not the other. So, it's a similar thing with breakups. Can we get to the point where we can realize that in most relationships, it's not a clear, someone's right and someone's wrong.
It's there's such an interesting, like, so there's that perspective you can take where it's like, I don't know, there's some people I follow on Twitter where they say things about people who support Trump that are like very repulsive and just like repugnant things to say about other human beings that I don't think any of them know. And then I sign on to Facebook and I see the exact same thing from the other side. But like, I wonder if there's a relationship between the tendency for people to act like that, the tendency for people to separate the world into goodies versus baddies, also being tied to their own sense of uncleanliness and their own set. Like, they're almost, there's people who are just, they'll blame themselves to a fault, and they'll make themselves the dirty. Like, I think I did that for a while. I think I sort of played up this not bad boy, but like degenerate persona, and I think I was running from the pure image that I had and when I was in SourceFed. And so then but it was never that. It was never that I was just this guy who was effing up crazy stuff. And so it's like an interesting, it's like I almost turned myself into even doing the special holy shit was basically going, I will say enough that you can look to me as being almost the scapegoat or almost the sacrificial lamb, going, look at how bad I am, look at how terrible I was, look at how awful these things got. But that was also kind of inaccurate, because it wasn't like I wasn't a bad person, and I wasn't this horrible degenerate. I wonder if there's something in people who, if they really feel, do you think they feel when they push people out, or that they themselves feel better about themselves, and so because they're trying to make themselves feel better, is that what the exchange is? Like, if by relegating, I think that's the right word, people into this dirt pile, I myself can feel better and can feel like I'm not in any kind and I have no dirt.
So that's absolutely true. But then what you're talking about with the holy shit tour is then potentially
holy shift, is that you said?
What did I say? Holy shift. Oh yeah, which is the Rob Bell tour. I think that you could describe it, if we want to use the Melanie Klein frame, which I think is useful for this conversation. You could say that is an early experience of the depressive position, which is exactly what you're saying, which is the early stage of the depressive position is where then you feel profound guilt. You realize that okay, I put everything onto someone else. You're kind of then masochistically kind of like experience your own profound kind of like implication in the problems. So for example, in marriage or whatever, that you go, I'm part of this. In fact, maybe I'm even a big part of it, and I'm an asshole. and that's you could say that's kind of an early expression of the depressive position. That's a real advance, and actually you have to go through that to get to the point where you get beyond it, not beyond the depressive position, but beyond that early stage.
Yeah.
And so what you were doing was a very positive thing, which is experiencing your own guilt,
Yeah.
and expressing it, not repressing it, but expressing it, and potentially doing some form of reparation, even if it's just in the form of making it into comedy, expressing it, which is a type of apology. It's a type of apology to the world. And that allowed you potentially to get to a healthier place.
Thanks. That makes me feel better. Yeah, I go back and forth on it because I made such a conscious and drastic choice to be incredibly open about basically everything. And I've noticed over the past year, I just stopped doing that, period. Like, I don't really tweet very much. I don't express my political views very much. I'm very timid with it. And then that, coupled with obviously the fallout, sort of cemented that, where it's like now I'm having to go back out and be like, oh yeah, it's still okay for me to be as open as I want to be, but I won't be as open as I was probably ever again, and I'm totally fine with that. It's like, I did it, fine, but now it's sort of like a shadow that I'm like, all right,
I'm guessing that you needed to do it. Like, that was your kind of, say, bringing in, like, the purity culture, like you mentioned. It's the scapegoat, it's the pushing out, it's the putting the dirt over there, and then what you were doing is you were then saying, hold on, I'm dirty, I'm I'm the tax collector, I'm the whatever. And then in doing that and basically saying sorry for that, then you're able to have basically what we call the kind of an integration of the reality principle. You know the reality that the whole thing was messy. There's no easy goodies and baddies in it. You've gone and you're able to integrate that into your life, and therefore you're in a different place. Now, the only thing being, because it's not stages, it's positions, it means this might happen again in your life or in my life. You can't sit back and go, no, I'm done. I've done it. But you've kind of gone through that phase, that cycle, and you've come out in a much better place as a result of it.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, I think, that you can even feel the paranoid schizophrenic stuff. Social media just creates it in you immediately, because it's so easy to read a headline, even just a hashtag, and it's like, it lights up that emotion, and then all of a sudden it's like, you suck, and then you're like, oh wait, no, oh crap, should I not tweeted that? I shouldn't have tweeted, and then
and it's an expression,
cringy,
but for me, and it's an expression of true anxiety in a contemporary world. So there's real anxiety. This is what I'm looking at actually at my festival in May. That's not a plug, but this is the issue.
Don't use your podcast to plug your.
Oh, is that okay? Yeah, but what I want to do at Wake is go. There's a genuine anxiety and a genuine alienation in society, and that needs to be uncovered and that needs to be looked at. But when it's displaced, then it becomes the paranoid schizoid position. So on Twitter, because there's genuine anxiety, it's then put onto another, whoever the other is, Republicans or immigrants or anti-immigrant.
My new joke in stand-up is I've talked about projection, and it's when you take all your anxieties and you just put them onto another person. It's like the Democratic Party of defense mechanisms, and people usually laugh at that.
That's very good. I was thinking, you could. I wonder if you could do a version where you say projection. It's where you take all of the terrible stuff and you project it onto my dad.
I do that. And then I follow it up by going, my dad suffers from this. I don't. My dad does, and that got laughed like once with people, but it was one of those laughs that's like, I get the joke, not like.
Did you ever see Stuart Lee when he made this really smart joke and people clapped, and he says I finally become the type of comedian where I tell a joke and nobody laughs but they clap their approval.
Oh man, he's great.
Yeah, but. That's very good. I want to see your new stuff, man. I'd like to see the stand-up you were doing on the road.
Yeah, it's getting there. I'm excited about it.
Is it mostly new? Is it half and half?
It's like half and half.
Half and half. I'd like to. You should do. Are you doing any live stuff here in LA?
No, I'm doing Washington D.C. April 3rd and 4th.
There you
Tickets
go.
below. That's my plug.
I saw on your Instagram story you put up somebody bought a ticket and it was like you got one.
One.
You sold one.
Yep, that's
Nice
usually how it
one.
works too. Yeah, it's so weird because yeah, I put like Bitly links and I can see the amount of clicks that it gets,
Oh, yeah.
but I can't see how many people are actually buying tickets who click on the link. So, and then I just play a guessing game. But the reality is that I can always just email my agent and be like, how many tickets have we sold? And they actually have a database that I could log into independently, but I choose not to do that because
Yeah.
it gives me anxiety.
Yeah, I never. Well, I've never looked up how many books I've sold,
Really?
but but I think it's complete weirdly indifferent. I know it's either going to be. It's definitely not a lot because I would know that by big royalty checks.
Yes.
So I just go, okay, it's probably not very much, but that's all right, you know.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious to know how much you've sold, but
Yeah, I should check it
what
out.
do you think the guess is?
I would say, the books in the first year, maybe 8 to 10,000.
So pretty good, man.
Is that? I don't know if that's not that great. It's not. It's not the secret.
Yeah.
It's not.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, it is, but
Yeah, that's true. But not selling like the secret.
yeah, nobody wants the truth. Yeah. So okay, what else you got?
Okay.
Any?
So yeah, well, that basically that's this. Oh yeah. One thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, we got
is
more.
We got
for
more.
sure.
Yeah, not much more maybe because we've been going for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I was going to say was, oh yeah, what is it about contemporary society that means that we're very prone to this proliferation of new purity cultures?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. There is anxiety, and I think there's a genuine anxiety, a genuine alienation within society, genuine kind of economic fears. Genuine fears of like genuine kind of underemployment, being alienated from your employment, having to work in a job that you don't overly have any investment in, all of these issues that are there. And so the conditions are ripe for generating paranoid schizoid kind of communities. So the issue today is how do we create environments that that encourage the depressive position.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I think the Fundamentalist is about. I think partly what our podcast is about trying to help just in a little drop in the ocean, but to try to bring the depressive position kind of to people, to kind of like help people be more cognizant of how they can be drawn into new purity cultures and how they can try to have more ambivalence in their life. And ultimately, what I would like to do with the Fundamentalists is over the next couple of years is we really expose what the true alienation and the true antagonisms within society really are.
Yeah. Why is it that I want to know who the next Hitler is?
Ah,
Why? Why am I going? Oh, this guy's just like Hitler. It's like what in me is desiring for there to be another Hitler?
yes. It's a difference between thinking maybe one's going to come along and wanting one, almost
Right.
we're being invested.
Constantly on the lookout. Oh my God, this is which also can happen because the other thing that we're not really talking about is when people just suck.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and how do you deal with, how do you tell the difference between the paranoid schizophrenic tendency that you can have of other out there bad with the reality that, in my opinion, some people just are the worst. So it's like you can't. Sometimes when that happens, it's even more tragic because if you can get to a place where you can see ambiguity and then you could still just go, yeah, no,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm all right, yeah. It's
And
like,
I think the difference is, well, there's two differences. One of the differences is even when you see someone who is very bad, who's potentially got an extreme purity culture thing going, whether they're right or left, right? They've got their enemy, the scapegoat. They've got who's pure and who's good. They're causing problems in the world. There's a certain extent to which if they're a big figure, there's still a question of why are they big? Why am I participating in a society that generates that? Am I part of that? Is there something about my position that actually fuels that position? Those questions show that you're in a depressive position, right? So even when you're confronted by someone who you for empirical reasons think is bad for society, you're still asking, oh, is there something about me or the community that I'm part of that actually fuels this, that generates it? Is there, and what can I do to bring a little bit of impurity into the purity culture? What can I do to kind of like be the prophet? Because in religion, it's the prophet who questions the purity culture. It's kind of the priest who protects the purity culture, because purity cultures they start off as good. They're about cleaning your hands, about washing animals in some way, doing all these things that are actually useful for stopping the spread of disease. The
Jordan Peterson, keep your own house clean before, clean your room before you.
There's an extreme kind of interesting purity thing going on there, but there's
also just you heard about the.
Oh, I know. Yeah,
that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Lots to talk about there. But yeah, so there's the purity culture, which has lots of good, but then it becomes too pure, and then the prophet comes in and they dirty up the water. Basically, they get the pond and they put a stick in it and they swirl the stick, and the dirt at the bottom of the pond comes up, and you realize, oh, the pond it's porous. There's dirt and cleanliness, and so that's one thing. Is can we kind of productively critique purity culture in a way that's beneficial? And then secondly, the paranoid dimension of the paranoid schizoid is that you know you're paranoid, although you don't know you're paranoid, but one knows they encounter someone who's paranoid when evidence, it's not that evidence defines what they think, it's what they think defines how they interpret the evidence.
Yeah.
So a paranoid person is libidinally invested in an enemy, like you're saying, like the bully at school who needs someone to bully. Mm-hmm. They need someone. And the difference between someone who just empirically looks at some data and goes, yeah, these people I think are not good, and I'm open to being wrong, and I'm open to talking to people about being wrong, but I think it is bad. And the person who is so libidinally invested in there being an enemy that they'll just interpret all evidence to kind of like solidify their position. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. Do you feel like there's a way to guide people out of that world, or even to not, because that alone sounds self-defeating, because basically I'm implying that, other people are like this. But
breaking the world into those people who break the world into
exactly.
good and bad, and those people who don't.
People like me who understand ambiguity, not like them who are bad. Yeah. That's like that. It's like one of those philosophy 101.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, if there's no
if
God,
you're skeptical of truth, is that not a truth that you're skeptical of?
Yeah. If it's agnostic and you can't know, how do you know that you can't know? You about that? Yes, but I mean, instance by instance, assuming you're in an instance where you can see it in someone, or you yourself have seen it in yourself and remedied, and you see that somebody else is still there. Is there? Because in my mind, I think about this especially with politics, where it's like I just want to agree with what they're saying. My new thing is to go, because I think a really popular talking point right now for Republican people is to go, well, I don't like Trump as a person. I think he's not a good person, but I agree with him on policy level, so I will vote for him because of his policies. And you're the other way around. I'm 100% the other way around.
I'm actually kind of the other way around.
Yeah.
I think he's a bit of a laugh, but I don't agree with him politically.
I would hang out with him.
I'm Marxist.
Yeah, I think it'd be hilarious. I think what he's doing with just being a complete maniac is I enjoy seeing.
If nothing else, it's entertaining.
Exactly. It's just his politics I don't happen to agree with. I'm not hating on the guy. I just don't agree with him politically. Yeah. But him as a person, great. And it's like, I don't know if the reason I like thinking about that or saying that is because it feels like even in saying that, there is something that's going to light up in the Trump supporter who just is like, oh yeah, that is kind of where, like, I don't really know anything about his policies, but I do just like him symbolically as this big figure who's just absorbing all this hatred.
That's like the Bill Hicks joke, where doesn't he say about, like, he was everyone's for the troops but against the war, and he says, I'm controversially for the war and against the troops.
Yeah.
Like, but this one's more right.
Yeah.
I mean, that to be honest, that's my. Again, I don't think there's much of a difference between the Democratic Party and Trump at all in terms of policies, pretty much. Anyway, but I won't get it.
Different podcast.
Maybe we should do politics sometime and lose everybody.
Yeah, great. That's definitely one thing I've learned about my political views is that I know enough
to be dangerous.
To be dangerous. Yeah. I know that I really disagree with pretty much everybody. So it's like in some way, but yeah, I think the purity culture that is defining the left right now, and them having their heads up their own butts a little bit, is creating the very thing that they are protesting against,
and the
or
only
helping,
way,
contributing to, at least.
And really, the only way that gets fixed is the same as, because we can learn from religion, is that it's when a figure comes out of the religion that critiques the culture. So basically, not an infidel. An infidel is someone who is in the other religion, but a heretic. A heretic is someone who's wrong within the religion.
Yeah.
So you need the heretic, but who comes out from within and respects the position, but is able to question the purity culture and not get killed while they're doing it, which is difficult to do.
Yeah, I'm very glad that I grew up conservative. Yeah. I'm very glad that I grew up kind of Republican.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that. I feel bad for people who grew up liberal and have always been. Anybody who grows up in the same political mindset and then stays there, I feel slightly, I'm like, oh, what a bummer.
Yeah.
It's more, I just think it's a more exciting thing to kind of, I realize I'm about to vote in the primaries, and I've voted as a Republican, a Libertarian, and a Democrat. Yeah. Like, my pendulum just went whoop. And but it's cool because I like that. I like the fact that it's been that shift.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that shift, then I think you have a very difficult time understanding where the other people are coming from, because you've never entered into it.
I think generally it's really can be advantageous to grow up in any group that is outside of the elites of any kind. So whether it's philosophy, that you're growing up outside of where the philosophical kind of heartlands are, or if you grew up in a religiously very conservative thing, maybe a Jehovah's Witness or something, only because you're constantly having to define yourself against the dominant system. And that can, when you get to a certain age, provide you with very interesting insights. So C.S. Lewis is a good example. Like he was obsessed with the scholastic period of philosophy, and actually I did my degree in scholastic philosophy. And it's kind of cool to just immerse yourself in a scholastic tradition, because it's so out of sync with the contemporary modern world that it can actually help you see things in the modern world that you wouldn't if you weren't out of sync with it. You know? So yeah, there's something to say for that.
This has been a good episode, Pete.
And one thing you mentioned as well, which we kind of touched on, is how do we minimize this paranoid schizoid? Can I say something about that?
Please.
And then we can close it up. Only I wanted to say, this could be the takeaway. Let's do the takeaways.
All right.
Okay.
Well, you do your
takeaway,
and I'll... Yes.
Okay. So my takeaway is the ways potentially to address the paranoid schizoid position is, one, to try to uncover the anxiety that creates it. So one, no judgment. Like we all are in that
That's
position.
the biggest.
Yeah, biggest. Don't judge, but because if what you want to do is understanding. So what's the anxiety that lies behind it? Understand it as well, understand the position, understand what's happening and what's going on, and have a bit of grace for yourself. And those things individually can help you get into the depressive position, but even culturally, if we're a little bit like that, we can find out how to do that at a cultural level. Maybe we can stop this schizoid splitting that we're seeing so much.
It's an epidemic.
It really does. Otherwise, oh my goodness, it just ends up in war. It ultimately ends up in bloody conflict.
I was talking to my brother on the way here, and we were getting caught up, and we were talking a little bit about just this is getting worse. Like the divide is getting more and more contrasted, and it's so crazy to see it in real time. And as we move forward and just seeing the complete disconnects that everybody has, ourselves included, it's like, something either has to break, or we need to shift some stuff and start talking to one another.
And you know what happens, right? When it gets worse, so we're talking about paranoid schizoid position purely culturally, but what will happen is people who are paranoid schizoid in terms of their personality, individuals, they will start to do violence against the opposition. And so what we'll begin to see is just the extremes on, say, the liberal and the conservative position. The extremes will start to do violence, attacking the opposition. We already see a little bit of it, because and those are the canaries in the mine. So they're people who genuinely have mental health issues, but what they're doing is they're expressing the cultural condition that was within their group.
Yeah, I was doing the classic. We would do this when we lived together. We'd switch between CNN and Fox News to sort of see the difference. And I switched to Fox News the other day, and it was like, they were like, we're the only news station reporting this story about a liberal person crashing their car into a Trump
I heard
stand.
about that. Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, because they were right. I didn't hear about that on CNN. But then when I turned to Fox, they're using it as an example of, look at how bad these people are. And it's like, okay, but it is those extremes coming at one another. And then that when that extreme happens on the other side, then you're like, look at how crazy those people are. And it's like, that's not helping.
Yes, it's not helping. You know, that's a symptom. Those extreme are a symptom of something that's boiling. And yeah, we need more people. I think YouTube's going to be important to this, is like, because so many millions of people watch. It's good YouTubers who are able to show ambivalence and be able to kind of show nuance.
So I got to get to work.
So you got to get to work.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. This has been fun in terms of takeaway for me. We'll keep talking about this in some way or another, but it's just, scary might be the wrong word. But I think it might be it's the right word. It's a little scary right now. And I think that being non-judgmental, being, truly seeking data and information, and being open to change is like the only thing you can do.
Apart from alcohol and drugs.
Exactly. Not alcohol, right. Pete. Don't be disgusting. Thank you, Pete. Thanks, everybody.